As a kid, growing up in Richmond Hill was my world. And the center of my universe was 113th Street and Liberty Avenue, because that's where my parents' house is. And that's the house that I grew up in and that my grandparents lived in before us. And both of my parents were actually born on 117th Street, so both sides of my family are from Richmond Hill, and they kept it local. And as a kid, my world was just like defined within the circumference of a few blocks, basically between the borders of Lefferts Boulevard and Rockaway Boulevard and Liberty Avenue. So I went to PS 108, and my happiest days are from that time. I really feel like there are no friendships like the ones that you have in elementary school. In elementary school, I had the best friends, and we used to play in PS 108 schoolyard, which was just a concrete schoolyard that was often littered with crack vials, but that was all that we needed to be happy. And PS 108 is, it's actually in South Ozone Park, and it's right near Aqueduct Racetrack. And every summer, my mom used to take me and my sisters to the Aqueduct, and we would go to the flea market and score amazing deals. Do you guys remember the flea market?
Yeah.
Of course, I miss that flea market. My first boyfriend actually worked there. So, I was born in 1982, right at the cusp of some big changes in the neighborhood. It was right before Richmond Hill went from a largely Italian and Irish neighborhood to mostly Guyanese and West Indian neighborhood. And as a kid, of course, I didn't have any understanding of the machinations of white flight. And I'm sure I wouldn't have been interested in it if I did. But I remember my neighbors, like the Gaffneys and the Connollys, moving out, and the Ramsey-Rupsings and the Alis moving in. And I just continued happily playing with my friends. And I really feel like Richmond Hill is such a glorious place to grow up. Every summer was magic. And in the summertime in Richmond Hill, you guys know what it's like. Music fills the air. There's like a constant soundtrack of reggae, soca, chutney, calypso, hip-hop, and Bollywood music. My personal favorites are the classics, Nani Wine, Big Belly Mon, and anything Sean Paul. And in the summers, I would like run around barefoot. I loved being barefoot as a kid, and I actually, like my mom let me, run around barefoot through the streets playing with my friends. And at dusk, we would chase fireflies, and then I would fall asleep to the comforting rumble of the A train, which I could hear from my bedroom window. And I, just have so many happy memories. And I think the greatest beauty about Richmond Hill is its diversity. So I was lucky enough to grow up eating my mom's pasta like on a daily basis. Of course, corned beef once a year on St. Patrick's Day, but also like my friends kimbap, flan, ras malai, and cornbread. And just from playing with my friends and like hanging out in their houses and in their mom's kitchens, I learned so much about the world, like from why my Hindu friends light candles at Diwali, to why Muslim women wear hijab, to why my Chinese friends got red envelopes full of money in February. And so without leaving Richmond Hill, I became, somewhat knowledgeable about different cultures. And I do remember it as like this multicultural utopia. But even, of course, within this utopian place, and even with my like deep family roots and like strong connection to the neighborhood, there were still times when I realized that I was perceived as an outsider. So just recently, one time I was riding the Lefferts bound A train, and when we pulled into Rockaway Boulevard, which is the last transfer point, a woman sitting next to me tapped me and was like, "It's your stop." I was like, I didn't have a suitcase, so she probably didn't think I was going to JFK, and it was winter, so it's safe to assume she didn't think I was trying to go to Rockaway Beach, and she probably just like didn't think that someone who looks like me would be going to Lefferts Boulevard on purpose. And I hate being stereotyped, but she seemed like she was like really concerned that I was lost. So I reassured her that I was going to Lefferts, and like I thanked her. And I can't really be mad because I am also guilty of racial profiling on the train. Like whenever I get on a crowded train going home, I'll look at the people who are sitting down and I'll like find white people and stand by them because I can assume that they're probably going to get off before we go too deep into Brooklyn and they want to get their seat. And usually it works. You don't want to like sit by old, yeah, you don't want to sit by the old South Asian ladies. That's not a good bet if you want to get a seat. So, yeah, but you know, stereotyping and profiling is of course not always coming from such a benign place. And over the years, I had my share of like insults, profanities, obscenities, and racial slurs thrown at me. But something that stands out to me is a memory of a time I was walking down Liberty Avenue and I passed this man who asked me, "Are you lost?" And his tone was not someone who wanted to help. It was more like someone who wanted to intimidate and challenge. And there was nothing in my demeanor that could have said that I was lost. Because I was walking, you know, down Liberty Avenue, the 2 blocks from the train at 111th Street to my house on 113. Like, I had walked down that avenue a million times before. But this man thought that I didn't belong there. And I was in junior high at the time, so I was like young and insecure enough to question if I did belong. And more so though than having skin color that set me apart, I felt like I had more existential anxiety and like questioning about my belonging because I was this like smart, pretty weird, incredibly dorky kid. So I was dorky, like I was skinny and gangly and you know, no athletic ability, like dodgeballs just bounce off of me in gym class. And I really loved to read. Like, books were my favorite thing. And in 2nd grade, I was reading the epic Les Miserables. And I would, like, read and, like, write and illustrate my own books just for fun. So I was that kind of kid. And there's this message, like, when you're growing up, if you're a smart kid and, like, adults identify you as someone who has potential, there's this message that, like, you're not sticking around in Richmond Hill. Like, because you're going to make it in life. And making it means moving out and like moving on to bigger and better things. So as a young person, I never had like clearly formed ambitions, but I ended up following that path. So a teacher recommended that I take the entrance exam for Stuyvesant High School, which is a specialized school in downtown Manhattan. So I got in, and when I was 13 years old, I started doing this daily commute from, you know, the Ada Lefferts all the way to Chambers Street in Manhattan. And you guys remember we used to be able to see from like the elevated A train, we could see the towers of the World Trade Center in the distance. And now I was going to high school just a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. So it was a very different experience. And at Stuyvesant, I met other like smart and dorky kids from all over the city. So I made friends from the Bronx, from the Upper West Side, you know, from Flushing, and even Staten Island. So basically, like, my universe expanded, and Richmond Hill was no longer at the center of it. And I had friends from all these different places, and we would hang out in Manhattan because that was our common ground. And Richmond Hill became a place that, like, I just came home to at night to sleep. And I felt like it's just a boring place, and like there's nothing going on here. And like if you want to experience culture and have fun, you have to go to Manhattan to do it. And yeah, after high school, I went to college in Ohio, and then I ended up working in Japan for 3 years. So I got out. I got out of Richmond Hill. But my time in Ohio and Japan actually helped me appreciate and see things that I had just like been blind to and taken for granted before. And if I never left Richmond Hill, I definitely wouldn't be able to appreciate it as much as I do now. So basically, Ohio and Japan, you can imagine, are not very diverse. And in Ohio, most of the people were white, but they weren't like white people who I knew in New York, because they were just like plain American with no hyphenation. They weren't Italian American or Irish American or Polish American, they were just American. And this kind of blew my mind, because I was like, oh, in New York, we keep track of those things a lot more. And So there were people who didn't really remember their family's immigration story or keep track of those roots, and I felt like they had lost something precious. And then being in Japan was even more eye-opening. I was in Tokyo, which of course is the biggest city in Japan, but I met so many people who had never met a foreigner before. And many people who didn't understand why I thought that diversity is a good thing. And I remember one night, I was tired and I yawned. And a Japanese man sitting next to me said, "Oh, foreigners yawn too?" And I was like, why would you ask me that? Why would you think that people from other countries don't get tired and yawn? But here were people who didn't have this understanding of our shared humanity with people from different countries. And of course, that understanding is something that's in the fiber of my being. From our earliest years at PS 108, we were taught to celebrate our multiculturalism and value our diversity. But more so than anything we're taught in school, I think we internalize that from our lived experiences and from these friendships that we have with kids who or their parents are from India, Bangladesh, Guyana, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. So whenever I would come home from Ohio and Japan, I would endure this long journey. My mom or dad would pick me up at JFK Airport, take me back to Richmond Hill, and then feed me some good home cooking, and I would go to sleep and wake up the next day and go out to see my friends. So I'd leave the house, walk down 113th, and turn onto Liberty, and that moment of turning onto Liberty Avenue is when the Richmond Hill air would hit me full force, and this irrepressible smile would spread over my face, and I'd just be filled with happiness because I knew that I was home. And that feeling is what inspired me to create this carving. When I was in college, I took a woodworking class, and I wanted to have a little piece of Richmond Hill with me, so I made a carving of the corner of Liberty and 113th. Thank you. And that feeling is also, of course, what inspired me to start Richmond Hill Love Letter. By the time I was in college, I had rejected the idea that culture is something that exists in Manhattan, because we have so much culture here, and we have so much to love here. And honestly, I don't care where you're from, no matter where you're from, you have reasons to love it, even if it's just for the fact that it has shaped who you are. And I feel especially with what's happening now, what we need is just the opportunity to appreciate what we have and to build on what we have and to really connect with neighbors. And I think this is more important than ever with what's happening in politics. So the artist and activist Arlene Goldbard has said that America's chief deficit is belonging. So many Americans are made to feel that we don't belong. And I shared these anecdotes earlier in my story about these simple times that made me question my own belonging. But of course we know that this sentiment can lead to much darker and more serious things than that. And of course, since Trump was elected, we've been seeing this increase in hate crimes that is very frightening. And it really pains me that that man is from Queens, that he's from my home borough. And while Queens does have these utopian elements that I was talking about, it has these darker elements too. So yeah, now more than ever, we need to have solidarity with our neighbors. And now that I'm older, I no longer question my belonging. I feel like Queens is quintessentially American. The people of Queens are beautiful, and we make America great, if I do say so myself. So, thank you, I'm not done. But yeah, I want a future where young people are not made to question their belonging. And although I do have this very complicated sense of belonging in Richmond Hill, there's no place that has ever felt more like home, and there's definitely no place that can rival the love for Richmond Hill that's in my heart. Thank you.
I'm not place where the Guyanese are waist. Young gal a walk and them a shake up them waist. Them a big up them chest, cause they know them are the best. Bring first place in a beauty contest. Richmond Hill, a little Guyana. 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 One day me been down to Richmond Hill. Me and the boys then we went for chill. Wanted to feel like we in Guyana, so we went down there check out them daughter.